Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as what if Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
At the right galaxy from the wrong angle, the way a familiar face looks unrecognizable in an unexpected mirror. He had been to this galaxy before. He had not been to this world before. And the fact that he was here now rather than any of the several 100,000 other places he was supposed to be was the direct result of a hybrid dimensional weapon, being several orders of magnitude more catastrophic than anyone had modeled. He took an inventory. Left arm, functional. Right arm, not functional, not in any way that mattered. Legs, present, status unclear. The device on his workbench, the Omnitrix, the ultimate model, the one that had been 3 months from completion and was now, due to the dimensional displacement event, approximately 4,000 light-years from his workbench, still attached to his left hand, somewhat miraculously, having apparently decided that his wrist was a better location than the rice paddy floor. Internal diagnostics, running. Conclusion, 4 hours. Maybe 5 if he was optimistic, which he generally wasn't. He lay in the mud and water and looked at the wrong stars and made the accounting that dying people make. The inventory not of the body but of the unfinished work, the things that would not be completed, the responsibilities that would not be discharged. It was a long list. It was always a long list when you were Azimuth, because Azimuth had spent 430 years generating responsibilities at a rate that would have been excessive for a being with a much longer natural lifespan. The Omnitrix. He looked at it. Glowing softly in the dark of an alien rice paddy, containing within its database the genetic profiles of approximately 10,237,416 individual species, the life's work of his life's work, the thing he built first as a weapon and then, in a long night of self-accounting not unlike this one, had decided to make into the opposite of a weapon. A library. An argument. An answer to the question of what you do when the universe keeps trying to reduce its complexity, keeps trying to turn 10 million different ways of being alive into one. You make a record. You carry it with you. You refuse to let it become silence. He thought about what happened to the Omnitrix when he died. The bonding protocol had not been completed. He had been in the middle of it, 3 months away from the intended recipient, who was somewhere in what had to be a more advanced civilization than this one given the amount of infrastructure visible from his position in the paddy, and the unbonded Omnitrix would, upon his death, enter a passive mode and wait. Possibly forever. Possibly until someone found it, and used it badly, which was the specific nightmare that had driven the bonding protocol in the first place. He needed a host. He did not have access to his intended host. He looked at the wrong stars and began, with the methodical pragmatism that had served him for 400 years, to reassess his options. He found the boy 20 minutes later. Not by looking, walking was not available to him in any useful sense, but by hearing. The paddy was at the edge of a tree-line, and the tree-line backed up against the outside of a large wall, and on the outside of the wall, sitting on a rock with his knees pulled to his chest and his face doing the specific tight, controlled thing that faces do when they are working very hard and not crying, was a child. 7 years old? Maybe 8. Small for his age, with hair the color of something that had decided to be yellow as a personal statement, and eyes that were very blue in the moonlight. He was wearing an orange jacket that had seen considerably better days, and there were 3 things about his face that Azimuth's biology scanner, still functional despite everything, flagged immediately. The whisker marks on each cheek, the chakra signature beneath them that was several orders of magnitude larger than the body containing it should have been able to support, and the expression. The expression was the one Azimuth recognized. He had seen it in 100 species across 1,000 worlds, the specific, exhausted look of a living thing that has been told, by the behavior of everything around it, that its existence is a problem, not by words. Words could be argued with. By the accumulated weight of averted eyes and crossed streets and rooms that went quiet when you entered them. The look of something that has been trying very hard for a very long time to prove that it deserves to be here and has not yet been given a satisfactory answer about whether that proof has been accepted. Azimuth had spent 400 years building a library of life because he believed, at his core, that every form of existence had inherent value. He believed it the way he believed mathematics, not emotionally, but structurally, as a foundational axiom from which everything else followed. Looking at this child in this moment, he found that he believed it rather more emotionally than usual. He crossed the distance to the rock. It took him considerably longer than it should have. The boy heard him coming, good instincts, better than a child should have, which made sense given what the biology scanner was telling him, and looked up with the reflexive wariness of someone accustomed to attention meaning trouble. He saw azimuth. His expression went through several phases very quickly: surprise, confusion, the instinctive question of whether this was dangerous, the resolution of that question in the direction of probably not. It's very small and appears to be injured, and then something that azimuth identified, with some interest, as concern. Are you okay? The boy said. No, said azimuth. I am dying. I have approximately 4 hours remaining and a significant number of things I need to say before that becomes relevant. The boy stared at him. Then he climbed down from his rock and crouched to be at eye level, which put him approximately at azimuth's height, which was not something most beings bothered to do and which azimuth noted. Can I do anything? The boy asked. Yes, said azimuth. You can listen. He talked for 2 hours. Not about the dying. The dying was a fact and facts didn't require extended discussion. He talked about the omnitrix. He talked about azimuth, which was the first time in 400 years he talked about himself in any meaningful way and which felt strange in his mouth, like a language he'd once been fluent in and let atrophy. He talked about the project, what the device was, what it contained, what it was for, and he watched the boy's face while he talked and tracked the understanding moving across it with the focus of someone who has spent a great deal of time trying to explain complicated things to people who weren't expecting complicated things and has learned to watch for the moment when it lands. It landed. Not all of it. The boy was 7 and the full scope of 10 million species catalogued across 400 years of dimensional travel was not something that landed completely in a single conversation even for adults with full context. But the shape of it landed. The what it was for. The reason azimuth had built it as a library rather than a weapon, the argument it was making by existing, the thing it was refusing to let happen. The boy was quiet for a long time when azimuth finished. Then he said, You traveled to 10 million worlds and you wrote down what everyone was like so nobody would forget them. In simplified terms, azimuth said. Yes, that's. The boy looked at the omnitrix on azimuth's wrist. The glow of it was visible in the dark, cycling softly through colors. That's the best thing I've ever heard of, he said, with the unguarded conviction of someone who has not yet learned to be careful about what he admits to finding beautiful. Azimuth looked at him for a moment. What is your name? He asked. Naruto, the boy said. Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto. Azimuth turned the name over. You're sitting outside a walled village at midnight alone on the eve of what appears to be your birthday. Why? Something moved through the boy's expression, there and gone, practiced in the way that the things we've had the most time to practice are practiced. Nobody really, there's not a lot of. He stopped. Tried again. It's quieter out here, he said. Azimuth understood everything the sentence wasn't saying. He looked at the omnitrix on his wrist. He looked at the boy. He ran the calculation that he'd been running since the rice paddy, the variables, the options, the probability distributions for various outcomes, and arrived, for the second time, at the same conclusion. Give me your wrist, he said. Naruto held out his left wrist without hesitation. No suspicion, no negotiation. Just the immediate, uncomplicated trust of someone who has decided that this is a good situation and is going to act accordingly. Azimuth noted this also. He removed the omnitrix from his own wrist. The device reconfigured as it transferred. It had been calibrated for a Galvan's appendage and was now adjusting for a human child's wrist, which the bonding protocol handled with the smooth competence of something that had been designed to handle exactly this kind of variability. It settled onto Naruto's wrist and the bonding sequence initiated. A ring of green light moving up his arm to his shoulder and back down, the biological skin completing in seconds, the core of the device recognizing its new permanent host and recalibrating everything around that recognition. Naruto looked at it. The omnitrix looked back at him, green, glowing, the face of it displaying a rotating alien silhouette that was searching through the database for the first 10 forms to make available. It's warm, Naruto said. Yes, said Azimuth. It will be. He estimated, About 90 minutes left. He spent them well. He told Naruto about the transformation mechanism, the dial, the push, the 10-second recharge between uses that the ultimate form reduced to 3 seconds after a series of rapid transformations. He told him about the alien consciousnesses in the database, not something all Omnitrix models had, a feature of the ultimate version that he built in deliberately. The belief that access to a species' abilities was incomplete without access to their perspective. He told him about the ultimate forms, which he was not ready for yet, and would know when he was. He told him that the device had a first law above all other laws. Do not use what you carry as a weapon against people smaller than what you're facing. He told him about azimuth. Not the work, that was already told, but the person. The long, strange life of it. The things he'd gotten wrong, which were many, and the things he'd gotten right, which he hoped were sufficient. He told him about Xenon, his homeworld, and the sound of its particular kind of rain, which existed nowhere else in the universe, and which he had heard for the last time 400 years ago, and remembered with a precision that time had done nothing to reduce. Naruto listened to all of it. He did not fidget. He did not look away. He sat in the dark outside a village that would not let him in and listened to a dying alien's life with the complete, reverent attention of someone who understood, without being told, that this was the kind of telling that needed to be received properly. Near the end, when the light in the east was beginning to think about Gray and Azimuth could feel the inventory getting shorter, he said, every species in this device was someone's whole world. He looked at the Omnitrix on Naruto's wrist, glowing soft and green in the pre-dawn dark. 10 million worlds. 10 million ways of being alive. Every one of them mattered to someone, somewhere, even when the universe acted like they didn't. He looked at the boy. Don't waste them. I won't, Naruto said. Immediately. Completely. The way he said things when he meant them with his whole self. Azimuth looked at him for a long moment. No, he said. I don't think you will. The sun came up. The light found them both, the old Galvan scientist and the 7-year-old boy with whisker marks and an alien watch on his wrist, and for a few minutes it was simply morning, the particular and irreducible morning of a world neither of them had planned to be in, doing what mornings do regardless of what's happening at ground level. Azimuth closed his eyes. Naruto sat beside him and did not leave and did not look away until it was over. He sat alone with the watch for a long time after. The village behind him was waking up. He could hear it, the sounds of a normal morning assembling themselves, people and carts and the smell of food from the market district drifting over the wall. His birthday. Today was his birthday. He was 7 years old and an alien had died next to him and left him something that contained 10 million worlds and the responsibility for all of them. He turned the watch over on his wrist. It was solid. Real in the way that things are real when they have weight and edges and the specific warmth of something that has decided you're its. The face of it displayed the rotating silhouette, still searching through the database, he guessed, still deciding which forms to offer first. He could feel it against his pulse point, and the feeling was strange because it wasn't mechanical, wasn't like wearing a device. It was more like the feeling of being heard, of something paying very precise, very complete attention to you. He watched the silhouette on the face rotate through a cycle and stop. The dial popped up. 10 silhouettes arranged in a circle, each one a different shape, each one glowing softly. He turned the dial slowly, looking at each one, trying to understand the shape from the outline. Some were humanoid, 2 legs, 2 arms, recognizable if wrong in the details. Some were very much not. One appeared to be a girl made entirely of fire, which the dial indicated was the first form in sequence, which seemed like a sign. He pressed the dial down. The transformation hit him like stepping into the sun, not painful, expansive, the feeling of suddenly being more than you were, more volume, more heat, more presence, the specific joy of a body that has found its right shape. He looked down at his hands and they were flame, not burning, not destructive, but being, the way fire is a thing that exists, and in existing generates light and warmth as simple facts of its nature. His whole body was fire. The morning air around him shimmered with the heat of him. And then, from somewhere, from inside him, from the watch, from a place that was both, a voice. Finally, it was a girl's voice. Warm, bright, with the snap and crackle of real fire in it, not the simulated fire of someone trying to sound fierce, but actual combustion. The voice of something that runs on the same fuel as the sun, and has never once considered that this might be anything other than wonderful. I've been waiting for you, she said. My name is Pyra. I'm a Pyranite. You're Naruto. I know, I was listening the whole time. I know everything he told you. I know you have 12 more hours of sleep you should have gotten this week, and I know you ate ramen for dinner 4 nights in a row, and I have opinions about that. A pause, and then, with a warmth that was different from the fire warmth, that was personal rather than elemental. I'm glad he found you. I've been in this database for a long time, and I have to tell you, you were worth the wait. Naruto stood in the early morning in a body made of fire and felt something he had no name for yet, something that would take him years to properly identify, that he would eventually understand as the feeling of a space inside him that had always been empty, discovering that it was not, in fact, empty at all, had never been, had simply been waiting for the right contents to arrive. He was not alone in here, not the Nine Tails. That was a different thing, a heavy, complicated, furious thing that he'd always been aware of the way you're aware of weather, as something external that happened to you. This was different. This was company. This was a voice that said I was waiting for you and meant it, that knew everything about him from the past 2 hours of listening and had decided, on the basis of that everything, to be glad. He sat down on his rock. He said, "Hi, Pyra." "Hi, Naruto," she said. The fire of him crackled in the morning air. Somewhere in the watch, 9 other silhouettes waited their turn. Above him, the village was fully awake now, going about its business, entirely unaware that on the other side of its wall a 7-year-old boy had just become host to 10 million species and was, for the first time in his life, having a conversation with someone who was completely happy to be having it. "Can I show you something?" Pyra said. "What I look like. What my home looked like. MYKDLDY, my planet. It's a star that didn't finish becoming a star, so its surface is alive." A small pause, and her voice had shifted slightly, from bright to something more careful, the way voices shift when they're touching something they love. Azimuth recorded everything. "I can show you." "Yeah," Naruto said. "Show me." The watch displayed it like a dream, a world of permanent fire and permanent wonder, an entire civilization of beings who were made of what they stood on, who needed nothing external to stay warm because warmth was what they were. Beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with whether it was visually stunning, beautiful in the way things are beautiful when they are entirely themselves, when every aspect of what they are is in perfect agreement with every other aspect. "This is where I come from," Pyra said. "This is one of the 10 million worlds he was carrying." A beat. "And now you're carrying them." Naruto looked at the world in the watch and felt the weight of 10 million worlds on his left wrist, and felt it settle into him not as burden but as purpose, the specific, clean, sustaining weight of a thing that is enormous and yours and worth every ounce of the carrying. "I won't waste them," he said again. To Pyra this time, and through her to all the others waiting in the database, the 10 and then the 50 and then the millions beyond them. "I know," said Pyra. "That's why he chose you." The sun was fully up now. It was his birthday. He was 7 years old. He looked at his burning hands and smiled. He came back as himself. The reversion was automatic, the 10-second timer running down and returning him to Naruto, orange jacket and whisker marks and all, and he sat on his rock and turned the dials slowly through the other 9 available forms, looking at each silhouette, thinking about what waited inside each one, not rushing. Azimuth had said, "They've been waiting a long time. They can wait a little longer for you to be ready." He would be ready. He was going to be very, very ready. There was a lot of work to do. He knew that. He had the academy to not fail out of, which was going to require some creative strategy now that he had options Irika-sensei hadn't planned a curriculum around. He had the Nine Tails to figure out a relationship with, and Pyra had already expressed a strong opinion about that. The Nine Tails is 9 living things bound together against their will, and you should probably start that conversation with respect rather than trying to suppress it, is my personal suggestion. He had Konoha to navigate, which had been difficult before and was going to be complicated in entirely new ways when people started noticing what was on his wrist. And he had 10 million worlds to carry. 10 million species. 10 million ways of being alive that were trusting him, now, with the fact of their existence. He thought about Azimuth in the rice paddy, looking at the wrong stars. He thought about the expression on his face when he'd said every species in this device was someone's whole world, not sad, exactly, but something more specific than sad. The expression of someone who has loved something enormous for a very long time, and is trying to find adequate language for the scale of it. He thought, I'm going to learn all of them. He thought, I'm going to learn every single one. The village behind him was fully awake. In a few hours, the shops would open, and the day would do its usual things, and nobody would look at him with anything other than what they usually looked at him with. That hadn't changed, but something had changed. Something significant and specific and permanent had changed. In the space of one night, on a rock outside a village wall, he was no longer doing any of this alone. Naruto, said Pyra, from the watch. She could feel the shape of what he was thinking, he realized. They were connected in a way that was going to take some getting used to. You should eat breakfast. I was going to. You were going to sit here and think for another hour, and then remember about breakfast. He laughed. It came out real, not the performed laugh he'd gotten good at, not the loud, bright deflection he used when he needed people not to look too closely at him. Real, the kind that comes from somewhere that doesn't get used often enough. You've known me for 20 minutes, he said. I know, said Pyra, and he could hear the smile in it. I'm very good. He stood up. He turned to face the village. The gate was ahead of him, the guards who looked through him, the streets that rearranged themselves around him, the whole complicated weight of a place that had decided he was its problem. He put his left hand in his pocket, warm against his leg. 10 million worlds. 12 voices. One kid who had been sitting alone on a rock in the dark on his birthday, and had ended up with more company than he knew what to do with. He walked through the gate. The academy had a rule about unusual items in class. It was not a well-publicized rule, more of an understood norm, the kind of institutional understanding that gets transmitted through teacher behavior rather than official documentation. Weapons above a certain grade, leave them home. Summoning contracts, not during arithmetic. Anything that glowed, pulsed, made noise, or appeared to be alive. Explain yourself immediately to the relevant authority and prepare for a lengthy conversation. Naruto had been at the academy for 3 weeks before Iruka-sensei noticed the watch. This was partly because Naruto was, by that point, a known quantity in the specific way that teachers develop to preserve their sanity. Filed under Uzumaki. Will cause trouble, monitor accordingly. Do not engage with whatever he's doing unless it becomes structurally dangerous. And partly because the watch didn't do anything immediately noticeable. It sat on his left wrist and glowed softly and cycled through its alien silhouettes when he was bored in class, which looked, from the front of the room, approximately like any other child fidgeting with a piece of interesting jewelry. What Iruka noticed, on the morning of the 4th week, was not the watch itself. What he noticed was the test scores. Uzumaki Naruto had failed every academic assessment administered in the previous 2 years with a consistency that Iruka had privately categorized as almost impressive in its completeness. Not failed by a little, failed with the special, comprehensive thoroughness of someone whose engagement with the material had been negative. Tests returned with answers that were wrong in ways that required more creative thinking than getting them right would have. The chakra theory test from 3 weeks ago, 42%. Below the threshold, but 42 was 42. The tactical assessment from 2 weeks ago, 61%. The chakra circulation diagram from last week, 78%, with a note in the margin next to question 7 that said the flow pattern here looks like XLR8's nervous system actually, which was not a sentence Iruka knew how to parse but which suggested engagement with the underlying concept. This week's test, sitting on his desk with the morning stack, 91%. Iruka put down his tea. He looked at Naruto, currently in the back row doing the thing he did when he thought no one was watching. Wrist up, dial turned, studying the silhouette with the focused attention of someone doing serious academic work. Beside the silhouette, barely visible at this distance, was something that looked like a girl made of crystal. Iruka picked up his tea again. He thought, I should find out what that is. He thought, he just got 91% on the chakra circulation exam. He thought, I will find out what that is after I figure out what happened to make that possible. What had happened was Diamond Head. Or rather, what had happened was Chris. XLR8, fast-talking, restless, perpetually in motion even when she was just a voice, explaining that the way chakra pathways worked was basically exactly like kinesiology, neural highways, except biological instead of electrical, Which means if you think about it like a city transit system rather than a river system, the whole diagram makes completely different sense. And Naruto had sat up in the middle of a study session and said out loud, to the empty apartment, "Oh, the transit system metaphor had been Chris's. The 91% had been Naruto's." This was the dynamic that had been establishing itself over the 3 weeks since the watch bonded. A collaboration that didn't look like one from the outside because all the visible output came from Naruto, but which from the inside was a continuous, overlapping conversation between a 7-year-old who was very good at caring deeply about things and a rotating cast of alien women who were very good at having information he didn't have and opinions about everything. Pyra was the loudest. This was not surprising, given that she was made of fire. She had opinions about Naruto's diet, still ramen, she said, every single evening, with the resigned love of someone who has accepted a losing battle asterisk. Opinions about his sleep schedule, 7 hours is not enough. Opinions about the other children in the academy. That Uchiha kid is carrying something heavy and I don't think he knows what to do with it. She also had opinions about training, which were useful because Pyranites had a warrior tradition that predated Konoha by several millennia and she had inherited its entire curriculum. Chris was the fastest. Not just in movement, though XLR8 speed was something Naruto had not yet tried in full, keeping it to brief moments of acceleration during his morning runs that left him 3 blocks ahead of where he expected to be, but in thought, in speech, in the whiplash transition from one idea to the next. She was the one who made the analogies. She took whatever Naruto was trying to understand and found the parallel in her own experience, and handed it to him like a different key for the same lock. Stone, forearms, Tetramand, was the quietest, which Naruto had not expected from someone who was, in her base form, enormous. She spoke infrequently and completely, in the manner of someone who has decided that words are finite resources and should be allocated accordingly. When she spoke, it tended to be the thing that ended the conversation, not because she shut it down but because she said the thing that made further discussion unnecessary. She made Naruto feel, when she talked to him, like he could carry anything. Not because she said he could. Because she sounded so completely certain of it that disbelief became structurally unavailable. And then there was Tide. Tide was ripped jaws. Piscis an aquatic species, deep sea, built for pressure and dark and the long silences between things. She spoke in the evenings mostly, when the apartment was quiet and the village was winding down and Naruto was in that liminal space between doing and being that opens up sometimes before sleep. She had the voice of deep water, unhurried, resonant, capable of carrying large things without appearing to effort it. She talked about her world, a planet that was entirely ocean, whose civilization existed in layers, whose concept of up and down carried philosophical weight that land-based species spent centuries trying to understand. She talked, sometimes, about being alone, not in complaint. In the particular way of someone who has processed something completely, and can describe it accurately without being destroyed by the description. The deep places are very quiet, she told him once, on an evening when he'd been quieter than usual. You get used to it. But quiet and alone are not the same thing, and I think you know that better than most. Yeah, he'd said. You're not alone now, she said. I know it doesn't look different from the outside yet. But from in here, from where I'm sitting, you are surrounded. A small pause. You have been, since the moment the watch bonded. You just can't always hear all of us at once. How many are there? He asked. In total. In the database. The pause before she answered was long enough that he thought she might not. Then, I don't know the exact number. Asmuth kept adding. He never stopped. Another pause. But the ones who are awake, the ones who are present and aware and have been here long enough to have conversations, there are 12 of us now. There will be more as you transform and they wake up. Why 12? Because you've transformed 12 times, Tide said. Each transformation wakes someone up. Introduces you. You transform as Pyra. Pyra wakes up and stays awake. You transform as me. I wake up. A beat. We've been in the database a long time. Some of us have been here longer than you've been alive. Longer than your village has existed. We've been waiting for the dial to turn. Naruto had lain in the dark and thought about that. 12 presences in the watch. 12 people who had been patient in the specific and enormous way of things that have had no choice but to be patient, and who had been waiting for him specifically, for this boy in this village, for this accidental meeting in a rice paddy that Azimuth had been heading toward without knowing it. He thought about the millions beyond the 12 who were still asleep in the database. He thought, I have a lot of transformations to do. The test scores were the first thing Irika noticed. The second thing was the incident with Shikamaru. Shikamaru Nara was the most intelligent student in their year by any reasonable academic measurement, and he had a gift for tactical analysis that his spectacularly consistent refusal to exert effort had not managed to fully conceal. He and Naruto had a relationship defined primarily by Shikamaru finding Naruto troublesome and Naruto finding Shikamaru's ability to fall asleep on any horizontal surface impressive. The tactical assessment exercise involved a simulation, a team extraction scenario, limited resources, multiple threat vectors, solve it. Standard. Irika had run it 20 times across 20 cohorts, and the solutions clustered into 3 or 4 approaches depending on the year's particular composition of personality types. Naruto's solution was not in the cluster. He had, apparently, approached the scenario by asking what each team member's specific and irreducible biological advantage was, not their chakra specialty, not their trained technique, but the base-level physical and perceptual capability that their body could do that no other body could do in exactly the same way, and then constructed a solution around the interlocking of those advantages, rather than around the standardized shinobi role assignments. Shikamaru, who had been watching this from 2 seats over with the lazy attention he applied to everything, said, "That's a better solution than mine." "Yeah?" said Naruto. "Yours accounts for variance," Shikamaru said. "Mine assumes standardized capability distribution. Yours doesn't need everyone to perform at average. It needs everyone to perform at specific." He looked at Naruto with the particular expression he wore when updating a prior. "When did you start thinking like that?" Naruto looked at his wrist. "I had some help," he said. Shikamaru looked at the watch. He looked at Naruto. He said troublesome, which was his highest available term of acknowledgement, and went back to his diagram. "He's good," said Chris from the watch. "He thinks fast. Not as fast as me. But fast." The Mizuki incident happened on a Thursday. Naruto had known it was coming, not specifically, not with dates and names, but with the general awareness that Mizuki-sensei had been watching him with a quality of attention that was different from Irika-sensei's attention in ways he'd been learning to read. Irika watched him the way you watch something you're trying to understand. Mizuki watched him the way you watch something you're planning to use. He'd mentioned it to Pyra. "Yes," she'd said without surprise. "I've been watching him too. He's going to do something. I don't know when." A pause. "When he does, let us handle the first response. Don't think, just transform. We've been waiting to show you what the ultimate forms can do." "What are ultimate forms?" "Evolved versions," she said. "What a species becomes if evolutionary pressure is applied at maximum. If Pyranites had faced their worst possible threat across 10,000 generations and survived it, what they'd become. Faster combustion. Better heat tolerance. The capacity to generate plasma rather than flame." Her voice had shifted to something slightly different, not quite pride, more like the particular reverence of someone describing their own potential. "Ultimate Pyra is what I'd be if I'd survived everything." "She's a pause. She's a lot. Is she you?" "She's what I could be," Pyra said. "There's a difference. But she's not separate from me. When you go ultimate, I'm still there. It's more like, you become the version of me that doesn't have limits yet." The Thursday Mizuki moved on him. It was 2 in the morning and Naruto was sitting in the forest with the Forbidden Scroll and the headache of having spent 2 hours trying to master Shadow Clone Jutsu, which was a technique that the Omnitrix had strong opinions about. You are trying to generate autonomous copies of yourself using chakra, which is fine in principle. The Splixen do something similar. The issue is your control, which we can fix by approaching it as a cellular division problem rather than a multiplication problem. This was Sarah, who was the Splixen form, quiet and methodical, with the precise focus of someone whose species had survived by being very careful about exactly where they put themselves. He'd gotten it, not perfectly. But the first clone had stood up, looked at Naruto with his own face, given him the deeply strange experience of looking at yourself from outside, and Naruto had understood, from the inside, why it worked. Then Mizuki came through the trees. He had the shuriken raised before Naruto fully registered he was there. Not a warning shuriken. Not a demonstration. The quality of Mizuki's movement was the quality of movement that Pyra had been teaching him to read in combat exercises. The specific weight distribution of someone who has decided that what comes next is not negotiable. Naruto had no time to choose a form. The watch chose. The dial spun without his hand on it. Spun and locked, and the button depressed itself, and the transformation happened in the space between Mizuki's arm completing its throw and the shuriken completing its arc, which was approximately 3/4 of a second, which was enough. Ultimate Pyra was not Pyra. Pyra was a girl made of fire, warm and bright and aggressive in the way of something that burns because burning is its nature. Ultimate Pyra was what fire became when every threat that fire had ever faced had been survived, when combustion had been pushed past its own limits, and emerged as something that ordinary fire looked at the way a candle looked at the sun. She stood 7 feet tall. She was not orange. She was white, the white of temperatures that don't have names yet, the white of things that have decided that flame is an intermediate state and plasma is the destination. The shuriken hit her and converted to energy before it reached her body, not deflected, not blocked, absorbed, the metal becoming something else in the field of heat she generated without trying. Mizuki stopped. He was a jonin. He had years of combat experience and a well-calibrated threat response. His well-calibrated threat response was currently producing a single output: do not move. Naruto looked at his hands. They were white fire. He could feel Pyra, not separate from him, she'd been right about that, but amplified, extended, the version of her that didn't have limits yet standing inside his skin and looking out through his eyes with an expression that was not angry, not threatening, just present, in the enormous, unignorable way of something that has committed completely to existing. You don't have to do anything, Pyra said, from inside the white fire, warm and clear and entirely calm. He's not going to throw another one. She was right. Mizuki was not going to throw another one. Mizuki was doing the arithmetic that the shuriken conversion had done for him and arriving at an answer he had not planned for. What? Mizuki said. It came out smaller than he intended. Naruto, Ultimate Naruto, White Fire Naruto, the impossible version, looked at him. You were going to tell me something, Naruto said. His voice was different in this form. Not alien, still the voice of the kid from Konoha with the orange jacket and the ramen problem, but with an undertone. Depth. The specific depth of something that contains multitudes and knows it. About the Nine Tails. About what I am. He tilted his head. Go ahead and tell me. I already know. I've known for a while. I just want to hear how you were going to say it. Mizuki stared at him. That's my boy, Pyra said, with a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Iruka arrived 4 minutes later. He took in the scene, Mizuki against a tree, which was not where Mizuki had started the evening, the forbidden scroll, intact, beside Naruto, and Naruto himself, who was not on fire anymore but who was sitting on a log with the Omnitrix on his wrist cycling softly through its colors and an expression on his face that Iruka had not seen there before. Calm. Not the performed calm of someone trying to seem older than they were. Genuine equanimity, the kind that comes from a settled interior. The kind that requires something solid to rest on. Iruka looked at the watch. He looked at Naruto. Are you all right? He said. Yeah, Naruto said. I learned Shadow Clone Jutsu. And also, he paused, looking for the right word. Some other stuff happened. I see that. Iruka processed the scene for another moment. Mizuki was conscious but not going anywhere in the immediate future. The forbidden scroll was secured. The forest was intact. Whatever had happened here was over and had resolved in a direction he hadn't expected but could work with. He sat down on the log next to Naruto. Do you want to tell me about the watch? He said. Naruto looked at it. In the dark, the glow of it was clearly visible, warm green, cycling through the silhouettes on the dial, the steady pulse of it against his wrist. An alien gave it to me, he said. 3 years ago. Outside the East Gate. Iruka absorbed this. An alien, he said. He was dying. He gave it to me because... Naruto stopped, and something moved in his expression that Iruka had learned to read over 3 years of watching this particular face. The look of someone touching something important carefully. Because he needed someone to carry it. And I was there. And he thought, another pause. He thought I was the right person. Why did he think that? Naruto was quiet for a moment. Then, because I was sitting outside the village on my birthday and I looked like I needed something to carry, he said, with the complete, unguarded honesty of someone who has processed something painful far enough that describing it doesn't hurt anymore. And he needed someone who understood what it felt like when the thing you are is treated like a problem. He looked at the watch. He had 10 million species in this thing. 10 million kinds of alive. And all he wanted was for someone to not waste them. Iruka looked at his former student, this 7-year-old who had somehow, in the space of 3 years and without telling anyone, been entrusted with 10 million worlds and had apparently decided that this was simply a responsibility he would meet, and felt something that moved in him with the particular weight of things that are important. Can I see it? He said. Naruto held out his wrist. Iruka looked at the Omnitrix. It pulsed once, warm, under his eyes, a greeting, almost the way something alive acknowledges a new presence. The silhouettes on the dial were rotating slowly, fire, crystal, a shape that moved like water, something that was all wings, something that was made of rock, something small and precise, something enormous and four-armed, something intangible and translucent, something rooted and growing, something that ran. 10 ways of being alive. 10 million beyond them. His name was Azimuth, Naruto said quietly. He was a Galvan. He traveled to every world he could find and wrote down what everybody was like so nobody would forget them. A small pause. He said every species in here was someone's whole world. The forest was quiet around them. Somewhere behind them, Mizuki was going to have a very long conversation with the Hokage in the near future. The Forbidden Scroll was going back to its vault. The sun was 3 hours away. Iruka sat on the log next to Naruto and looked at the watch that contained 10 million species and said nothing for a while, which was the right thing to say. Then, Shadow Clone Jutsu, he said. Show me. Naruto grinned. The grin was the one Iruka knew, bright, complete, the one that didn't have a performance layer underneath it, the one that was simply Naruto being glad. He made the sign. 3 clones materialized around him, each one perfect, each one wearing the same grin. Iruka looked at the clones. He looked at Naruto. He's going to pass you, said Chris, from the watch, in a tone of complete satisfaction. Right now. He's deciding it right now, and she was right. Iruka reached into his vest and pulled out a forehead protector, the Hittite, the symbol of a graduated shinobi, and held it out with the expression of a teacher who has revised his assessment, and is not sorry about it. You passed, he said. Naruto took the headband with both hands. He held it for a moment. Then he tied it around his head with the practiced motion of someone who had imagined doing this a very large number of times and was now doing it for real. And when it was tied, he sat up straight on his log in the middle of the forest at 2 in the morning with a forbidden scroll behind him and a watch full of 10 million worlds on his wrist, and looked like exactly what he was, a shinobi of Konoha, beginning. From the watch, 12 voices spoke at once, not in words, exactly, in something more fundamental than words. Agreement. Recognition. The specific warmth of people who have been watching someone become themselves and are glad to have seen it. There it is, said Pyra. And there it was. The full activation happened at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Naruto knew the exact time because Chris told him. She always knew the exact time. It was a Kinoceleran thing. Their species had evolved a biological chronometer so precise that Chris could tell you the time to the millisecond and had strong opinions about the inefficiency of mechanical clocks, and because the moment was specific enough that he wanted to remember it. Not the way you remember things that happen to you, the way you remember things that change you, that draw a line between before and after so clean and complete that everything on the before side looks slightly different in retrospect. He had been asleep, or almost asleep, in that particular borderland where the body has committed to rest but the mind is still moving slowly through the day's residue, sorting and discarding, when the watch on his wrist went from its usual soft cycling glow to something considerably more emphatic. It didn't hurt. He wanted to be clear about that, in the subsequent telling of it. It didn't hurt, and it wasn't frightening, and it wasn't like anything he had a reference point for. Which meant the only thing to do was lie still and let it happen and trust that Azimuth had not built something that would do this without reason. The green light expanded from the watch up his arm, The same bonding sequence light from 3 years ago, but different now, more complex, more structured. The way a foundation is different from a finished building. It moved up his arm and across his chest, and he felt it touching things, not his body, something underneath his body, the part of him that was made of potential rather than biology, and recognizing them, cataloging him the way Asmith had cataloged everything, completely, precisely, with the respect of something that understands that what it's looking at has inherent value. The light reached his head, then it reversed and went back to the watch. The dial spun. Every silhouette on it lit up simultaneously. Not 10, not the 12 he'd accessed before, but every slot on the dial cycling through new forms at a speed his eyes couldn't track. The watch running through its full database in a compressed sequence that lasted exactly 4 seconds and felt like 4 years. When it stopped, the face of the watch displayed a number, not a silhouette. A number, 12, and then, like a door opening, 12 doors opening, simultaneously, onto 12 different rooms that had always been there and were now simply accessible. 12 voices arrived at once, not loudly. That was the thing that surprised him most about it. He'd expected it to be loud. 12 people, 12 simultaneous presences, the overlap and collision of it. But it wasn't. It was the way an orchestra sounds when it tunes before a concert, multiple things at once, but not chaos. The specific, complex harmony of many distinct entities occupying the same space and not erasing each other. He lay in the dark. He listened. There he is, said Pyra. Warm and immediate, already present in the way she always was, the first voice, the one that had been there longest, that felt most like a familiar room. We've been waiting for you to catch up. I've been awake for 6 weeks, said Chris. Do you have any idea how long 6 weeks feels when you think at my speed? I've had time to redesign your entire training schedule 400 times. You've redesigned it 412 times, said a new voice. Calm. Dry. Precise in the way of someone who tracks things because tracking things is simply how they interface with the world. This was Sarah, the Splixen, who Naruto had transformed into twice, whose species reproduced by cellular division and whose relationship with the concept of self was consequently more flexible than most. She spoke rarely and counted everything. 412. I counted. The number isn't the point, Chris said. Numbers are always the point, Sarah said. Can everyone please, said Stone. Tetraman, four-armed, enormous, steady as bedrock. Take a breath. I don't technically breathe, said Tide. From the back of the chorus, from the deep place she always occupied, unhurried and resonant. None of us do in here. It's a figure of speech, Stone said. I know, said Tide. I was making an observation. Naruto lay in the dark and listened to this, and felt something happening in his chest that started as a laugh and became something more complicated and ended up as both at once. He pressed his hand over his mouth. His shoulders were shaking. Are you laughing? Pyra said. A little, he said. Good, she said, and he could hear the smile in it. We were hoping you would. He spent the rest of the night learning their names. Not all of them. Some were already known, the first 12 who had woken progressively as he transformed. But the full activation had changed the quality of the connections, deepened them, made them more present, like the difference between hearing someone's voice through a wall and hearing it in the same room. They were here now in a way that they hadn't been before, and here meant he could feel the texture of their personalities rather than just the surface content of their words. Pyra he knew. Fire and warmth and opinions about ramen. Chris he knew. Speed and restlessness and 412 training schedule redesigns. Stone he knew. Steadiness. The particular calm of something that is large enough not to need to prove it. Tide he knew. Depth and patience and the long, unhurried sentences of someone who has spent a great deal of time in very quiet places. Sarah he knew. Precision. The counting. The way she said things once and said them completely, and then waited to see if you'd understood rather than repeating herself. The other 7 he was meeting properly for the first time. There was Flora, Wildvine, the plant-based form, who spoke with the slow, considered rhythm of something whose relationship with time was rooted rather than mobile. She had a gentleness that was different from Stone's steadiness, not the stillness of rock but the patient certainty of growth, the kind that bends around obstacles rather than stopping at them. She had been in the database, she told him, longer than most of the others. She had been awake since his third transformation and had been waiting, she said, with a quiet patience that was not quite reproach and not quite longing and was somehow both. There was Shade, Ghost Freak, the ectoneurite, whose species was made of ectoplasm and occupied a space between the physical and something else that didn't have a clean name. She was the quietest of the 12. Not shy, she had, beneath the quiet, a depth of presence that made tides seem surface level by comparison, but careful. She spoke like someone who had learned that what she said had weight, and had decided to use that weight intentionally. She told him that her species could touch the part of a person that was underneath everything that happened to them. The core of them, she said, in a voice like dark water. The piece that was there before everything else got layered on top. I can reach that. Which means you can. Which means you should be careful, because not everyone wants to be reached that deeply. There was Canabolt, Vera, Arburian Pelorota, a species that rolled at high speed inside a nearly indestructible shell and who was, of all 12, the most immediately and uncomplicatedly delighted to be here. She had the energy of someone who had been asleep for a very long time and had woken up ready to go, who treated existence as a continuous mild surprise in the best possible direction. She laughed at things, not performing laughter, laughing, with the complete physical commitment of someone whose default mode was enjoyment. I like this world, she said, within the first 5 minutes, looking through Naruto's eyes at the ceiling of his apartment. The gravity is good. Good rolling gravity. There was Vine, Stink Fly, Lepidopteran, winged and compound-eyed and capable of flight and corrosive gas projection, who had an astonishing vocabulary, and used all of it at full speed in ways that occasionally required the others to ask her to slow down. She was sharp in the way of something that sees in every direction simultaneously. Compound eyes meant compound perspective, multiple angles on every situation, the inability to have only one view of anything. She had opinions about the tactical deficiencies of shinobi combat that were specific and detailed and correct in ways that made Naruto uncomfortable. There was Crush, Upgrade, Galvanic Mechamorph, whose relationship with technology was not using it but becoming it, whose species could merge with and enhance any mechanical system, who spoke with the particular precision of someone who thinks in terms of systems and interfaces, and the elegant efficiency of well-designed things. She was curious about chakra in the way that engineers are curious about new materials, not aesthetically, but structurally, with an intense interest in what it could do and what its load limits were and how it interfaced with biological systems. And there was Bright. Bright was the last one. The one he transformed into exactly once, briefly, by accident, during a training run 3 months ago, when he'd hit the dial wrong and spent 45 disorienting seconds as a conductoid, a species made of electricity, capable of absorbing and redirecting energy in any form. He'd reverted quickly and not tried it again. He hadn't been ready. Bright spoke last, after the others had introduced themselves, in the quiet that followed. Her voice was different from the others in a way that was hard to describe, not louder or softer, but more present, the way a struck tuning fork is present in a room, as if the sound of her carried slightly further than it should. I've been watching you for 3 years, she said. Since before the others were awake. Since the bonding. A pause. Conductids absorb energy. We take in whatever is around us, and hold it, and redirect it. I've been absorbing everything about you since the first day. Another pause longer. I know you better than any of them. I know what the mornings feel like when you wake up and the apartment is still empty, and the village is already busy outside. I know the specific way you look at the Hokage monument when you're running past it in the morning and the fourth's face is there and you don't know yet that. She stopped. The watch was very quiet. That what? Naruto said. You'll know, she said. Later. When you're ready. There's a sequence to things. A beat. I just wanted you to know that I know. That I was here for all of it. That nothing about you, none of the mornings, none of the nights, none of the days when the village looked through you, went unwitnessed. Her voice was steady and warm and had the quality of something said once and completely, and needing no repetition. You were never actually alone in that apartment. I was always there. Taking notes. The silence that followed was the kind that arrives after something has been said that was precisely right, and doesn't need anything added to it. Then Chris said, Okay, but can we please talk about the training schedule because I have been thinking about it for 6 weeks and I have 412 ideas, said Sarah. Yes, and they are all good. Some of them are physically impossible for a human body, Stone said. His body isn't entirely standard, Chris said. Ninetales chakra, Galvin watch technology, 12 alien physiologies he can access at will. Standard human physical limits don't. Standard human physical limits absolutely still apply during the periods when he is a standard human, Stone said. Which is most of the time. Not if we train him right. We are not going to break the child, Stone said, with a finality that closed the sentence like a door. Chris was quiet for exactly 1.4 seconds. Okay, but hear me out. Naruto lay in the dark listening to Chris and Stone argue about his training schedule with the patient authority of people who have very different opinions about what patient authority means, and Tide made occasional observations from the deep background, and Vera laughed at something Vine said, and Shade was quiet in her particular rich way, and Flora was thinking slowly about something she would say when she'd finished thinking, and Bright was taking notes, and Pyra was warm and present in the foreground of all of it. He fell asleep. Not because it was boring. Because it was, in the specific and irreducible way of the thing he'd been missing for 7 years without having a name for it, comfortable. The apartment was not empty. The night was not quiet in the wrong way. He was surrounded, exactly as Tide had said, and the surrounding felt like exactly what surrounding was supposed to feel like, not constraining, not crowding, but present. A perimeter of care, and inside it rest. He fell asleep and slept 8 full hours, which was the first time in 3 years. Finally, said Pyra, to the others, in the quiet dark. He needed that. The training schedule that emerged from the debate was Chris's in structure and Stone's in limits, and everyone else's in specific content, which meant it was more comprehensive than any single one of them would have produced and more survivable than Chris's unmoderated version. Mornings. Physical conditioning with Pyra's combat tradition as the framework. Pyronite warrior training was built around the concept of efficient intensity, the idea that the most effective training was the kind that improved the most systems simultaneously, which suited Naruto's schedule because he had school 6 days a week and couldn't afford separate sessions for everything. After school, jutsu practice, with alien consultation. The 12 had collectively decided that their most valuable contribution to his shinobi training was not physical, it was perspective. They had between them the accumulated tactical knowledge of 12 species, 12 different evolutionary solutions to the problem of survival, 12 different ways of thinking about space and movement and threat and opportunity. Shade's species was intangible. Shade's perspective on why physical defense was philosophically interesting was consequently unique. Vine's compound eye view made her natural at identifying attack vectors. Crush's systems thinking made her excellent at analyzing why a particular jutsu worked or didn't at a structural level. Evenings, Tide talked. This was not structured as training. It was structured as Tide talking and Naruto listening and occasionally asking questions, and the content was her world, her people, the things she knew about existence that were specific to the deep ocean but turned out to apply elsewhere. Iruka had noticed that Naruto's emotional intelligence had improved dramatically in the past year and attributed it to maturity. It was actually Tide. Nights, Bright took notes. The schedule worked. This was visible in the training ground and in the academy, and in the way Naruto moved through the village, not dramatically, not in the way that made people stop and look, but in the way that competence and groundedness make themselves known gradually, through accumulated evidence, through the changing quality of a person over time. Iruka noticed. He was making a habit of it. 3 weeks after the full activation, he kept Naruto after class. Your taijutsu has changed, he said. I've been training more, Naruto said, which was true and not complete. It's not just the volume, Iruka said. The form has changed. The way you read the space around you, you're tracking vectors I don't teach. Multiple angles simultaneously. He paused. That's not standard academy taijutsu. Naruto looked at his wrist. Iruka followed his gaze. The watch was cycling softly, the way it always did. The watch teaches you? The people in the watch teach me, Naruto said. It's complicated. They're people. They live in the database. They have their own ways of doing things and they tell me about them and sometimes I can apply them. He paused. Vine has compound eyes. She sees every direction at once. She taught me to approximate that with human eyes. You can't see everywhere, but you can learn to track peripheral movement patterns that tell you what's happening at angles you're not directly facing. She spent a week just on that. Irika sat with this for a moment. How many of them are there? He said. 12 active right now, Naruto said. Millions total. The full database. He looked at the watch. Every time I transform into a new form, one of them wakes up. That's how it works. I transform, I meet them, they stay awake. And they're all. Irika stopped. Started again. Are they girls? Naruto said. Yeah. I noticed. He shrugged, with the elaborate casualness of someone who has spent a great deal of time thinking about something and has decided that the appropriate public face of this is nonchalance. I don't know why. Maybe it's the watch. Maybe Azimuth did it on purpose. Maybe it's just how it worked out. A beat. I don't really mind. Irika looked at his student. He thought about the boy who had sat in the back row for 3 years and failed everything with comprehensive dedication, and the boy who was sitting across from him now and had gotten 91% on the chakra circulation exam and was describing the inhabitants of an alien device with the comfortable familiarity of someone describing their household. Are you all right? Irika said. With all of it. The responsibility of it. Naruto thought about this with the genuine consideration he was starting to apply to questions that deserved it rather than answering reflexively. Yeah, he said. I think so. A pause. It's heavy sometimes. 10 million worlds it's a lot to think about. But then Pyra says something and Tide says something and I remember it's not weight in a bad way. It's weight he searched for the word. In a full way, like carrying something that's worth carrying. Well said, murmured Bright from the watch. I'm writing that down. She wrote it down, Naruto told Irika, with a slight smile. Irika looked at the watch. The watch cycled through its silhouettes: fire, crystal, water, wings, stone, division, roll, electricity, root, speed, intangibility, flight. 12 ways of being alive. 12 presences, fully alert, fully present, arranged around one boy like a compass rose arranged around north. Tell me about them, Irika said. If you want. All 12? Naruto looked at him. Then he settled back in his chair with the ease of someone who has wanted to have this conversation for a long time, and has simply been waiting for someone to ask, and he told Irika about all 12 of them. Pyra's fire and volcanic opinions, Chris's impossible speed and 412 training schedule redesigns, Stone's steadiness and the specific way she said things that made uncertainty structurally unavailable, Tide's deep patience and the things she knew about the difference between quiet and alone, Sarah's counting and her cellular precision, Flora's rooted gentleness, Shade's careful reach into the underneath of things, Vera's complete and immediate delight at everything, Vine's compound vision and its tactical gifts, Crush's systems thinking and her fascination with chakra circuitry, Bright's quiet ongoing documentation of everything. He talked for an hour. Irika listened for an hour. Outside, the academy emptied, the village did its evening things, the light changed from late afternoon to early dark. Inside, a teacher and his students sat across a desk and Naruto described 10 million worlds and the 12 people currently awake inside them with the careful, loving detail of someone who has been given something precious and intends to handle it accordingly. When he finished, Irika was quiet for a moment. He chose well, he said. Azimuth. Naruto looked at the watch. I think about that, he said quietly. Whether he chose me or whether he just found me. Whether I was the right choice or just the available choice. A pause. I used to think maybe it was just because I was there. Right place, right time. And now? Irika said. Tell him, said Stone, from the watch. Now I think. Naruto looked at his hands. At the watch on his left wrist, warm and present and cycling through its 12 faces. I think it doesn't matter. He gave it to me and I have it, and there are 10 million worlds in here counting on me, and whether or not I was the right person, I'm going to be the right person. He looked up. I'm going to make it true by being it. That's the only way it works. Irika looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then he smiled, not the teacher's smile, not the managing a difficult student's smile, but the real one, the one that reached his eyes. That, he said, is the most Naruto thing anyone has ever said. From the watch, 12 voices laughed at once. It didn't sound like chaos. It sounded like 12 very different kinds of music deciding, spontaneously, to be one thing. It sounded, Naruto thought, surprised by the specific accuracy of the word, like family. 3 days after the full activation, Kakashi Hatake read their team assignments, and looked at Naruto Uzumaki over his little orange book, and saw the watch, and made a note in the part of his mind that tracked things which were either very good or very dangerous, and couldn't yet determine which. Both, suggested his experience. He turned the page and thought about the team he'd been given, and thought about what training them would require, and thought about the watch on Uzumaki's wrist, and thought about the last 3 years of academy records, and thought about a